Good Thursday afternoon. It is October 5th. It's time for our daily tropical update, and we have a brand new 14th named system of the year. That's Tropical Storm Nate. We talked about its formation yesterday, first as a tropical depression, number 16. Now it's made that upgrade. It's strengthened a little bit to a tropical storm named Nate. Can you see where it is here on the satellite imagery? Kind of hard to pinpoint, right? Not a very well-organized system. In fact, it's already over land in northeastern parts of Nicaragua. You can barely make out its circulation here with some very minimal convection around the center of circulation there. But it's not going to remain over land for very long. Going to move over northeastern Honduras in the next 6 to 8 hours and then back out over open water. Now that it's a storm that may be threatening the United States, National Hurricane Center is certainly very interested in it, sending out a lot of aircraft to investigate it and fly through the storm. I want to talk a little bit about the tools that are being used and the aircraft that are flying through the various storms. The first here is a high-altitude jet, the GIV Falcon. They nicknamed it Gonzo. And what this does is it flies around or over developing tropical cyclones. This is forecast, or this is planned to go out into Nate within the next 12 hours or so, and it's equipped with a lot of really cool, very expensive equipment to give us a lot of data that's crucial to a lot of the forecast models we use to forecast where the storm is going to be heading. One here is called a GPS drop wind sonde. Now, these are released from the aircraft mid-flight to measure the pressure, temperature, humidity, and GPS Doppler frequency. It's also equipped with its own Doppler radar. It's called tail Doppler radar, or TDR, and this looks at the structure of the storm, and this gives us a better depiction of its intensity. So that's pretty cool there. Also, another aircraft that flies a little bit lower and actually through the storm is called the P3 Orion, and there's two of these, Kermit and Miss Piggy. Right? Kermit's going out into this storm. In fact, right now it's flying a mission over the Gulf of Mexico, sampling the air there as Nate is forecast to head into that area, but also equipped with some really cool stuff. Doppler radar, two separate ones. The first is the lower fuselage, and then as we saw with the jet, the GIV, it's the tail Doppler radar. This essentially, when they're used together, takes an MRI scan of the storm, gives us the internal structure, lets us know where the eye wall is, sorts of really cool things like that that are crucial to the forecasting method. And also a microwave radiometer. Sometimes it's used, sometimes it's not. This was very useful for Irma when it was out over the open waters to determine the wind speed at the surface of the ocean. Kind of helped us gauge the intensity of the storm at that point as well, way back in August and September. Actually, that's when that was. But I want to show you here the Hurricane Hunter aircraft. This is the P3 Orion Kermit that we just talked about. It is flying a grid pattern over the Gulf of Mexico, well ahead of where Nate is heading to sample the environment here to put into the computer models that will be run from here on out to kind of see where this is going to head. Let's revisit the satellite imagery here. Remember, this is the infrared imagery. The brighter cloud tops, the whites, the blacks, and the reds indicates colder, higher clouds. The higher or taller they are, they're higher up in the atmosphere, colder atmosphere at that point, and that indicates very healthy growth in thunderstorm activity. They're not being blown off by heavy wind shear. So that's some good news. When we see a lot of that around the center of circulation, it gives us an indication it's a very healthy storm. Not seeing a whole lot of that right now. You can kind of pinpoint where that center is there over northeastern parts of Nicaragua, about to head over the border into Honduras before it goes back out over open water there. Again, there's that pinpoint of that center of circulation. But even though it's just a tropical storm, still a life-threatening tropical storm in terms of the amount of rainfall it's going to bring in parts of Nicaragua and Honduras. In fact, this is one of the Futurecast models showing anywhere from 10 to 15 inches of rain falling in this area. That leads to mudslide and obviously flooding risks in those areas as well. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about, we always are referencing, different tropical development methods and things that are needed. So I thought it would be pretty helpful to show you the ingredients necessary, almost a recipe of sorts, to let you know what is needed to see a tropical storm like Nate kind of take shape. So for growth, we look for a disturbance at least 300 miles from the equator. That's kind of odd. Why does it need to be 300 miles from the equator? Well, at the equator, there's virtually no Coriolis effect. You need that to initiate spin or rotation with a storm. So it has to be far enough away from that. We also need warm ocean waters, which there's been no lack of this year, of 80 degrees or warmer. A lot of the waters near Nate, 85 to 88 degrees, so that's not an issue. Plenty of moisture in the lower and middle atmospheres. That's evident in the tropical areas. And, of course, we do need low wind shear, allowing those thunderstorms to grow vertically. Now, against growth, pretty much everything you're not seeing here. Dry air, moderate to high wind shear, cool ocean water, sub 80 degrees Fahrenheit, and land interaction. It needs to be out over open waters. The fuel source is the warm water. So if it's away from that, tropical systems seem to die out. So we do have the favorable wind shear. This is the current and future outlook for wind shear environment. You're looking at the blue areas and some yellows indicating the winds are very light to loft, allowing the thunderstorms to develop as this moves north. And pretty much the projected path is right here. And you notice there's a lot of blue and a real lack of the pinks and reds, which indicates unfavorable areas for wind shear. Let's revisit what wind shear actually is. For a low wind shear environment, we get the vertical growth of the thunderstorms. The winds are a little bit stronger aloft. It blows the tops right off of those thunderstorms so they don't develop to maturity. And in turn, we don't get a really functioning tropical system. It just doesn't grow and sustain itself. Now we have the ocean water temperatures. Remember, that's the main ingredient, 80 degrees or warmer. Certainly have that here. And of course, that hot water, that warm water extends to a depth which is also an ingredient necessary, allowing that fuel, that ocean heat content, to be used as a fuel source for these systems. Now, look at how much above average these sea surface temperatures are. Now, 2 to 5 degrees to you and me doesn't really seem like a big deal, but it is. That is way, way above normal, and that's just that much more fuel available. And this is the area right now that Nate just moved out of. Now it's over land in Nicaragua, but it's going to be moving into another area that has just a few degrees below where we were before. 1 to 3 degrees still above that average in the middle 80s. And once it moves into the Gulf of Mexico, still plenty of fuel available there with ocean temperatures 1 to 2 degrees above normal. All right, here's the official National Hurricane Center track and stats on the system. As of the 11 o'clock advisory, it is currently situated over land, but it will reemerge back over open water here by as early as tonight and start to re-strengthen as it's going to be back over a very warm ocean water area, ocean heat content, and very low wind shear. So all ingredients we need for that development. Then it's going to scoop by pretty much grazing Cancun. If this center does stay just 20, 30 miles off to the east there and out over open water, this will be a drastically different system by the time it emerges over into the Gulf of Mexico. It wouldn't have that land interaction that may weaken it just slightly. So once it hits the Gulf of Mexico, it is forecast to strengthen into a Category 1 hurricane. The trouble with this system isn't so much going to be the track, because that is, I don't want to say straightforward, but it is certainly a much easier forecast track with the steering mechanisms that are in place, taking it pretty much due north. We're not looking for any turn to happen like we had with Irma, like we had with Maria, that sort of deal. This time around, it's going to be the intensity forecast that might be tricky due to the environment being just well above average. Rapid intensification is highly likely here. So Category 1 is probably way underdone and very, very conservative. So we're going to have to watch that closely as it moves pretty much right down the center of the Gulf of Mexico. And then possibly, as of the latest advisory, that cone of uncertainty stretches from the far western part of the Panhandle of Florida all the way just to the west of New Orleans in Louisiana. So that cone of uncertainty isn't huge, but it certainly encompasses some very populated areas, as you know, in the Gulf of Mexico along the Gulf Coast there as it makes landfall late Saturday night in early Sunday. Certainly hurricane precautions should already be taken by that point, so keep a close eye on this forecast. And as it heads north, it weakens down to a remnant low, again, over land. That'll help to kind of help it fall apart. But I want to talk about that land interaction, because right now it is over land, not a particularly mountainous area. Mountainous land areas are far worse than just kind of ocean area, not ocean areas, but tidewater areas that are just flat and, you know, they're still away from the ocean waters there. But the terrain much higher, farther inland, not going to be interacting with that. So that's some good news. Over the open waters here, and then it does make another run for possibly a secondary landfall over Cancun. This would be very, very short-lived, likely not weakening it too much. But as I mentioned, if it does stay 20 miles off towards the east, it'll fare a lot better and not have any of that land interaction. So we're looking at two possible interactions with land there. Here's how the models are seeing things, guys. Each line you see here is a different run of a different computer model, right? Pretty good consensus here, almost pinpointing right on top of New Orleans as we get into Saturday night. an early Sunday morning, and then you notice kind of a curve off to the north and east as thanks to it getting swept up by an incoming cold front from the north and west. Now here's the GFS ensemble, the American model, one model run 20 different times, giving you pretty much the same sort of outcome here. Maybe a few of the ensemble's members moving off to the west here, but a lot of them consolidating somewhere along the Louisiana coastline of the Gulf Coast. Now what's steering, Nate? Well, we have that Central American gyre circulation, right? This is a closed circulation that's not particularly strong, but it does cause some spin-offs here, which is what helped Nate to get itself together. But that's going to drive it north, and then also a ridge of high pressure off to the east of it there is going to kind of push it almost due north here in the next couple of days, right into the Gulf of Mexico and eventually somewhere along the Gulf Coast. So we'll watch this closely. Again, we're going to really look for that rapid intensification once it hits open water again tonight and eventually into the Gulf of Mexico in the next few days as well. Something to watch here, especially if you're joining us from the Gulf Coast states. Another update tomorrow for any changes. You can join the conversation on social media. You have any questions about where you live, any precautions, that sort of deal, feel free to reach out. Meteorologist Tim Pandajis on Facebook and 13 Tim Pandajis on Twitter.